guys, so today we are going to talk about something different than the normal, like, usual fun beauty stuff. We're going to talk about something really down to earth. This is a real talk, if you will. It's been a while. I just kind of have to say that this is going to be a video where I talk about having borderline personality disorder. I'm going to talk about it in depth. I'm going to tell you guys my story with it. So just a disclaimer that there may be some trigger warnings for things like self-harm and, you know, suicide and things like that that are really sensitive subjects. So, you know, there won't be any like graphic anything. I'm just going to talk about it, and I want to say if you are sensitive to that, just be mindful that this is a video where we're going to talk about it. So, disclaimer aside, we're going to talk about a few different things today. It's been a week and a half, and I kind of have to like get myself in order for this. You know, I obviously haven't like written out any kind of script or, you know, list of what I'm gonna say, and that's just because I don't really function that way. So please excuse that this may be a little scatterbrained, but I'm gonna do the best I can to make it relevant. So the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that I've been gone for a week and a half. And the reason I've been gone for a week and a half is because I recently had a really long flare-up of borderline personality disorder, which is something that I have. And I have mentioned this, I believe, twice on my channel so far, but I've never really gone into depth about what that means for me and what that means for me in like a long-term sense. So I definitely wanted to kind of just clue you guys in on that. So in a minute, I'm going to kind of describe what it is. I'm going to read you guys the actual definition of the disorder, but I kind of wanted to tell you that I've had it for, I don't know how long I've had it, but I was diagnosed with it about 4 or 5 years ago. There's no telling how long it's actually been present in my life. Usually they say that it starts around, or, you know, comes into your life around childhood and then manifests throughout your teenage years and, you know, whatever. So a lot of people get diagnosed later in life, a lot of people get diagnosed early in life. It's just one of those things. It's pretty common. However, it's not really well known because it's a newer, you know, it was only brought into existence in the 80s is when they finally came up with a name for it. So during healthy periods of my life, like right now, you know, I see a therapist every other week. So I'm like, you know, I've got everything in check and everything in my life is good and like there's no big problems. So sometimes I get a flare up and it'll last for a couple hours or like a day or two. And this is the biggest flare up I've had, like the longest lasting flare up I've had in I think ever. And it's been a week and a half and it's still going, but I really needed to just kind of talk to you about where I'm at because you guys are my people and you deserve to know what's going on. So let's go ahead and talk about what borderline personality is real quick. I'm gonna just bust out the phone here and pull up Google. So I'm gonna read you the actual definition from borderlinepersonality.com. It says, borderline personality disorder, or BPD, is a serious mental illness that causes unstable moods, behavior, and relationships. It usually begins during adolescence or early adulthood. Most people who have BPD suffer from problems regulating their emotions and thoughts, impulsive and sometimes reckless behavior, or unstable relationships. It says here, BPD affects 5.9% of adults, which is about 14 million Americans, at some time in their life. BPD affects 50% more people than Alzheimer's disease and nearly as many as schizophrenia and bipolar combined. So that's the by-the-book definition, and you can obviously go on and Google BPD or borderline personality disorder and read all about it. There's like tons of information now that you can read and lots of foundations and things, and just make sure that you read from somewhere that's, you know, reputable, that seems reputable. So like I said, I was diagnosed by a therapist about 4 or 5 years ago. I don't remember the exact date, but you know, I went in and I told her what was going on. I was feeling all kinds of things. I was dealing with self-harm, and it's something that I had struggled with for several years at that point. And, you know, she was like, you know, this is what it is. Let's get you to a specialist. Let's get you in this treatment thing called dialectical behavior therapy, which is like a targeted group therapy for borderline patients. So it was like a whole thing a couple of years ago, and now, you know, I'm much better than I was, and I see a therapist, like I said, every other week, and that's just kind of like to check in and make sure everything's going well. But, you know, I'm in this flare up. So, you know, like I said earlier, everything is going fine. I don't have any huge life problems right now, and yet I am super depressed. And that's part of what borderline is for me. For me and for a lot of other borderline patients, you know, it's because it's a chemical imbalance per se. And I'm gonna like paraphrase this stuff, so if I say something incorrect, just like forgive me, I'm like trying here. But it's a chemical imbalance in a part of your brain called the amygdala, which regulates your emotions and serotonin and things like that. So for me, that means that I have times of extreme happiness and I have times of extreme sadness, and it's very much polar. Like, it's not bipolar, but there are similarities in the two, in my opinion. So for me, that means that, you know, the borderline as a whole and the symptoms of depression, anxiety, you know, self-harm, you know, feeling unworthy, things like that, you know, feeling fear of abandonment, things like that, they all feed. So I have a borderline flare-up and I feel those things, or then I feel those things individually. I feel anxious, and then that feeds into depression, and then it feeds into the other symptoms. And having BPD means that because I have that inability to regulate my emotions correctly, it's very easy for me to fall into a period where I feel like I want to do things that are harmful and self-destructive. And so the reason that I go to therapy is to learn the skills that I need in my brain to keep myself from falling into those times. So I can say it's been at least a year since I've done anything that was self-harmful to myself, possibly even longer. And, you know, I feel good about that, and I haven't relapsed at all. But, you know, it's one of those things where I still think about it and I still get tempted to do those things. I just have to really work to not do them. So that's what that is. So you're probably wondering how this ties into the new tattoos thing, and I'm gonna get into all of this stuff all in depth, hopefully. But before we get too far in, I kind of want to tie it together a little bit. Yesterday I saw my wonderful tattoo artist Chantal Smith. I'm gonna leave her info below if you want to check her out, because she's literally amazing. But I went to see her and I got 2 little tattoos done, and one of them is related to the whole BPD situation and one of them is not. Just to, you know, take care of the one that's not related, but you guys will recognize, I finally got my tooth tattoo done. And if you saw my wisdom tooth removal video, then you knew I was gonna get a tooth tattoo, and so I got this one, and I wanted 2 teeth because that's what I got removed, and I didn't want them straight because they were impacted and like a mess. So she did this cool thing with like 3D style, and it's just really cool and I love it. And, you know, I'm probably gonna talk about this way more on my Instagram, but it's not really related to this video. So just so you can see that, that's what that looks like. And the one that is related to the BPD, and the reason why I'm bringing the tattoos into this video, is because I got this new one on my finger. And never in my life did I think I would get a finger tattoo, but I did, and I have one now for the rest of my life. So right here is a semicolon, and it is for the Semicolon project. So if you guys haven't heard about the Semicolon project, you really should look it up. Just Google Semicolon project and you will be amazed at all the amazing stuff that you find. So the Semicolon project is something that I believe was developed in 2013, and it's a nonprofit movement that started to help people to talk about their mental illness and to talk about depression, anxiety, you know, and suicide, because a semicolon is a piece of punctuation used in a sentence when an author could have ended the sentence but chose not to. And so for people who have dealt with suicidal thoughts and other, you know, mental illnesses, it's kind of a sign of hope. Like, you could have chosen to end your life, but you didn't. You kept going, and you were victorious in that you kept going. And so, you know, for me, it absolutely means that. But, you know, I've also heard it spoken about, and it means this for me too, is you have to continue the conversation. You know, these mental illnesses like depression, anxiety, borderline, bipolar, schizophrenia, everything, you know, all of that stuff needs to be talked about. And there's such an under-awareness of mental illnesses and how widespread they are. And from small scale to large scale, people can have their lives saved just if they can feel like they can talk about it. And that's one of the things that is such a struggle when you have these issues, is that it's really easy to close yourself off and not talk about it and not ask for help. And that's definitely something that I want to change about myself. Because when I'm having a flare-up, like recently, you know, I tweeted out, I said, look guys, I'm having a flare-up, I need to cope with this, I just have to take some time to take care of myself. And you guys were amazing. Like, you sent me the sweetest tweets, and you guys were just so supportive as always. Like, you were just perfect and wonderful, and I'm so thankful for your support and for your patience with this. But, you know, I tend to get in this mode. The point is, I tend to get in this mode where I don't want to talk about it. Like, I don't want to open up and tell anyone that I'm feeling this way. I just want to deal with it on my own. And as hard as it is to open up about it, you know, I think that that's something I need to learn how to do, because voicing your feelings can really help a lot. And it can be as simple as talking to a friend about it. You know, like if I confide in a friend, you know, I have borderline, you know, this is what I'm feeling really depressed today. I have no reason to feel depressed, but I'm feeling depressed today. You know, I struggle with this, and this friend might not know that. It may inspire that friend to open up and say, hey, I've been struggling with, you know, anxiety, and I haven't talked to anyone about it, but I feel like it's, you know, pretty bad, and it's, you know, it feels not good, and I need to talk about it, and then we can have a conversation. And then not only have you leveled with someone, but you may have possibly saved that person from struggling alone. And it's never fun to struggle alone, you know? It's not fun to struggle together, but it's better to have someone that you can level with on this stuff, and it just feels good to not be alone. So the semicolon tattoo really signifies just keeping the conversation going, being victorious in the fact that you chose not to end your life, and just talk about it, you know, just raise awareness that having mental illnesses of any scale and any kind is something that needs to be talked about. It needs to be known, and it doesn't have to have a stigma attached. It doesn't mean that you're, you know, crazy or like whatever you want to say. Like, there are so many offensive stigmas when it comes to mental illness, but so many people deal with them, and so many people deal with depression and anxiety. And you hear about those two things more often than you do about bipolar or borderline or things like that. But awareness needs to be raised of these things because people have them, and we're all people, and that makes it important. So that's just my 2 cents on it. So switching gears here, now we're going to talk a little bit about my history with borderline and how it all started and the self-harm and all of that stuff. I want to put this out there because I've never had the guts to actually admit this stuff before publicly, but I think that getting this tattoo and being a part of the Semicolon project, I need to like talk about this. And I know that there are going to be a lot of people who identify with this and a lot of people who don't, and I just ask that you respect that it's a part of my history, and if you relate to it, then that's why I'm doing it, and if you don't, just respect that it's a part of my journey. So that's what it is. But right now we're going to get into kind of like story time. So just full disclaimer, like I said, I'm trying to keep this like fairly organized, but you know, it is what it is. So I don't know how it all started for me. You know, I struggled with my weight ever since I was a kid. I've always been overweight for my entire life, and it's just always been part of who I was and who I am, and it shaped my whole self. So I grew up with really low self-esteem, you know, especially in high school. It's so hard to be bigger than your friends. Like, it is just so hard. And the amount of bullying you can be subjected to, and people just don't accept you. I mean, it is just a mess. And I feel for you guys. If any of you are at that point in your life, like, I know what your struggle is. Like, I've been there, and let me tell you, it gets better, because it does. But man, it just sucks. So I struggle with that, and have struggled with that for my whole life. And body acceptance and body positivity is something that's new for me. It took me all of these years to realize that my body is exactly what it should be. And as long as I'm being healthy and eating healthy and taking care of myself, then I get to be happy with my body and what it is and what it wants to be. So that's how I feel. Soapbox moment over. But you know, that has really shaped the way that I dealt with my emotions and things. In high school is when I started cutting. I was 15 and I was, you know, dating a bunch of boys and whatever, and not all at the same time, like at separate times. And I just didn't know how to deal with my emotions. You know, my mom tells me that as a kid I was always super stoic, and I didn't ever cry. Like, once I became a teenager, I stopped crying. Like, past, you know, little kid falling down on the ground crying, like emotional crying. When you're hurt, when you get rejected, when you get broken up with, things like that, you have to release that emotion somehow, and I didn't do that. And I think that was a big reason why I ended up going towards self-harm. You know, I needed some way to get rid of the bad feelings that I had, and I had friends that would cut and talk to me about it, and it became a viable option for me. But let me just be the first to say, it's not a viable option, and it's not something that's good, and it's not something that helps, and it doesn't actually solve any problems at all. So please do not take this as an advocation, because I am in no way advocating self-harm. I am very much trying to protect you guys against it. So disclaimers all over the place, but they're important. So It started when I was 15 and it followed me throughout high school, and I saw several different therapists and I could just never get what I needed because I didn't know what was wrong with me, and the therapist couldn't figure out what was going on, and I just didn't even know what to do with myself. So that continued for a long time, and then I got in a really great relationship and stopped harming myself for a long time, and then the relationship started to get bad and I started harming myself again. And you know, after that, my parents had a really messy divorce, and that kind of like triggered it to start again, and I started self-harming again, and it was just a vicious cycle. Like I could never stop, and I didn't have the skills that I needed to talk myself out of those moments. So I fell prey to them a lot, and I thought that it was okay, and I thought that it was good, and I thought that it was helping, but it wasn't. So I went to college and I still continued to do it here and there, and then I moved to New York, and I had stopped for a while, and then I started again, and that was really like what it was. I stopped, and then I started, and I stopped, and then I started, and then I stopped for a little bit, and then when I was 19, 20, 21 is when it got really bad, and there was just, I don't know, life was hard because I was, you know, trying to make it on my own and trying to be my own person, and I was still dealing with feelings from the divorce that I hadn't dealt with, and you know, I had kept a lot of it in and all of that, and I just had no ability to cope with those things. So I was cutting pretty bad around that time, and you know, I had this time where I had suicidal thoughts, and I was seeing a therapist. I had just started my therapy for borderline. I had just been diagnosed, and I was just at like rock bottom, and I had the suicidal thoughts, and I had some attempts, and fortunately I was fine, and you know, obviously they weren't successful, but that is the reason that I have this flower tattoo, and I've never really talked about that in detail, I don't think, but this tattoo covers the scars from that time that I had my suicide attempt and it failed, and that's like such a blessing. But I got this lotus flower because lotus flowers are something that grow, you know, from mud, and it's the beauty that grows from, you know, a dark, dirty place. And so for me, it symbolized taking a bad past and turning it into something beautiful. So I got this lotus flower, and it covers the scars so that they're not so visible, and it just symbolized going from rock bottom to a beautiful place and turning that struggle into something beautiful, and that's what I'm hoping to do with my story. So that's the story behind the lotus that you guys have seen about 1,000,000 times. So that's that. So after that, I ended up transitioning from cutting to burning, and that's, you know, a whole other thing, and it was just as bad. I mean, like, talk about dangerous stuff. Both of them are so dangerous. Any self-harm is so dangerous, and it's such a bad thing. But you know, I spent probably a year burning as a self-harm method, and that was just really bad. So after that, you know, I had really great friends. I still have the friends, and they helped me through it, and my therapist, of course, helped me through it. And you know, I've been great, and I guess clean, you could say. I've been clean from self-harm for I think it's probably 2 years. And so that's something I celebrate every day, is that I've got a good track record. So like, it's a great motivator for me, is like, I have been able to not do that in so long. It makes it easier to not do it. Whenever I have the temptations to do that, you know, I think, do I really want to go back on all of this progress that I've made with myself? Do I want to relapse into a self-harm time? And the answer is no, I don't. So I have skills that I've learned from therapy, and I have that motivation in its own way to keep myself from relapsing. So that's that. But yeah, so that's my self-harm story. I know it's like really not easy to hear, and I just want you guys to know that like, I'm okay, and you don't have to feel like, I don't know, like sorry or anything. Like, it's really just fine, and I cherish it as a part of my story because it's helped me be who I am. And more than that, I just hope that my story can help people out there who are also struggling to know that it does get better, and you do learn how to cope, and that you can live a normal life with borderline or with a mental illness. You can have a wonderful life. You just have to learn how to cope with those feelings. And what I can say is that the best thing for me was to find a great therapist. And I mean, I know it's expensive and I know it's money that we don't want to spend, of course. It's worth it. It's one of those, it's that money that like I feel good using because I know that it helps me. So don't be afraid to spend your money on making yourself better. Like it's a good thing. Like it's worth, you know, giving up things for and really taking care of yourself, because that's what is most important, is taking care of yourself first. So, you know, if you are struggling in a way where you feel like you are at risk to do something really harmful to yourself, call 911, call a suicide hotline, reach out to the people who can help you. There are so many hotlines out there that I wish I would have called and I didn't, and that's something that I regret, and I'm thankful that I made it through. But do yourself a favor and take the steps you need to make it a little easier, because it can get really hard, and I've been there and I know that, and I just want you guys to do it better than I did, because I made a lot of mistakes and I regret them, and I want to teach you guys, or at least let you guys see that you don't have to make the same mistakes that I made. So take it for what you will. But that's my story. You know, I've been really good for a long time, and like I said, sometimes I still get borderline flare-ups, and that means sometimes I feel really anxious, or sometimes I feel really depressed, or sometimes I just feel like crap, and that can either just go away in a couple hours, or it can snowball like it has this time. And even with nothing going on, I still just, I don't know, feel like crap. And I have for the past week and a half, and I haven't uploaded, and I'm sorry that I've been gone, but I've been taking care of myself and trying to cope with it, and it would be unfair to you guys if I didn't tell you about it. So, you know, with that all in mind, you know, I love you guys so much, and I want you to know what's going on with me, and I want you to know where I'm at, and I want to help any of you guys out there that have ever struggled with any of this, or that are struggling with this, or that may struggle with this in the future. Like, I hope that this can inspire you, and I hope that it comes across in the way that I want to, and I don't have any control over that, but I am just willing the good vibes into it so that you guys can see the point of why I told that fairly graphic story. So sorry if it was weird, but you know, I got the semicolon tattoo, and so with the semicolon tattoo, I am committing to starting the conversation and continuing the conversation, and I'm not going to end the chapter, you know, I'm not going to end the sentence, I'm going to keep it going. We're going to talk about it, we're going to be open about it, and I'm going to try really hard on a personal level to reach out to someone when I'm feeling bad, and that's really hard. But you know, the tattoo is a commitment. I'm going to struggle with borderline for my entire life, and I'm going to have this tattoo for my entire life, and I put it on my hand so that people would notice it and say, what is that? And I can say, let's talk about mental illness, and you know, just like bring awareness, because these things are important. I thank you, if you've made it to the end of this, for making it to the end of this. You know, like, it's pretty cool that you sat through this whole thing to listen to my story and get to know me a little better, because this is something that a lot of people don't know, and now a lot of people are going to know about it, and that's really scary, but I'm trying to be brave and just do it. And so I appreciate those of you that are going to take this and love me more for my flaws instead of taking it and turning it into something bad. I thank you again. If you made it to the end of this, then you're pretty freaking amazing, and it's just really special to me. So I'll end here. Love you. Bye.